The person who keeps pulling away from you isn't pulling away from you. They're pulling away from what you make them feel. And what you make them feel is the most terrifying thing their nervous system has ever. Not because it's bad, but because it's real, and real is the one thing their entire architecture was built to survive by keeping at a distance. That's the thing no one says out loud. The distance isn't about you being too much, it's about you being exactly enough, and exactly enough is precisely what breaks the system that learned to only function when love was safely incomplete. You've been reading The Withdrawal wrong, not because you're not perceptive. You're probably one of the most perceptive people in your own life, which is part of why this is so disorienting. You're reading the distance as a statement about your value, as evidence that what you offered wasn't sufficient, as the conclusion of a calculation that weighed you and found you wanting. But that's not what's happening. That's never been what's happening. And the gap between what the distance means and what you'd been told it means by the silence itself, that gap is what this is about. Let's go somewhere most people don't go. Let's go something the body registered as important and real and not replaceable by anything the day is about to offer. They don't summon you. You're just there. In the texture of those minutes, in the temperature of the silence, before the phone gets checked for anything other than you. And then the system comes online, and the narrative assembles. And the day begins with the story that the distance is right, that the distance is necessary, that what exists between you is exactly what it appears to be from the outside, and nothing more, hidden underneath. But that's not what those 4 minutes were. And somewhere in them, in the body, not in the mind, they know it. Here's what makes the avoidance distance so specifically maddening to be on the receiving end of. It's not consistent. If it were consistent, you could calibrate. You could build a wall of your own, brick by brick, using the consistency of their absence as the mortar. But it's not consistent. There are moments, you know exactly the moments, Isel, where something breaks through, where the management fails briefly, and what's underneath comes out unfiltered in a look or a sentence or a particular quality of attention that has nothing casual about it, regardless of how casual the moment was supposed to be. Those moments are real. They're not performances. They're not strategies. They're the system failing to contain what it's been containing. And your nervous system, which has been watching for exactly this, catches it before your conscious mind has time to form a thought. And then the management snaps back into place, and you're left holding the moment while they're already returned to the narrative that the moment didn't mean what both of you know it meant. That's not manipulation. That's a system doing the only thing it knows how to do with something it can't. Put it back in the box before anyone, including themselves, has to decide what to do with it. The reason they only want you, and I mean this in the most specific and least romantic way possible, has nothing to do with destiny or compatibility in the way those words usually get used. It has to do with the particular frequency of what you are. Every person has a frequency. Most people's frequencies can be tolerated by the avoidance system because most people's frequencies don't penetrate the management layer. They interact with the surface. The surface has been designed for exactly that, to be interacted with, to produce responses that look like connection without requiring the system to actually open. Your frequency gets through the surface, not because you're trying to, not because you're doing something right or wrong, because something in the specific combination of what you are lands differently in their system, bypasses the surface layer, touches something underneath that the management was built to protect, and the system that experiences that penetration doesn't register it as intimacy. Not first, it registers it as breach, as the alarm going off, as the thing that all the architecture was designed to prevent finally having happened. And here's the impossible situation you're now inside. The trap that's been active since the first moment you felt what you felt. If you're the one who gets through, If your specific frequency is the one that bypasses the surface and touches who underneath, then the intensity of their response to you will always be disproportionate. Always, because they're not responding to you the way they respond to people who interact with the surface. They're responding to you the way the entire system responds to a breach. And a breach response from a system this defended looks, from the outside, exactly like withdrawal, exactly like distance, exactly like not wanting you, when it's the opposite. But if you try to make yourself less penetrating, if you try to interact with the surface the way everyone else does, if you try to be less of what you are to make the system more comfortable, you'll stop being the person they only want. You'll become someone they can manage, and managed is not the same as wanted. Managed is what happens when the frequency doesn't get through, and some part of you knows, with a precision that doesn't need explaining, that being manageable is not what you're here for, so you can't win by being more, and you can't win by being less. And the middle ground doesn't exist, because the thing that makes you the person they only want is exactly the thing that makes it impossible for them to be with you without the management going to maximum capacity. That's the trap. You're in it. There's no exit from inside it. And the awareness of that, the full, uncomfortable, unresolvable awareness, is the only thing that's actually useful here. Let me tell you what's happening in them when the distance is at its most complete, when the silence has been going on long enough that you're started to construct the narrative of finality around it, when the management seems to have won, and the distance seems permanent, and the system seems sealed, because this is the part that never gets said accurately. The distance is not peace for them. I want to say that again, because it's the thing that the silence most convincingly lies about. The distance is not peace, it's regulation, and regulation is not the same as peace. Regulation is what the body does when the alternative to regulation is overwhelm. It's the breath you take when you're keeping yourself from crying in a context where crying isn't available. It's not calm. It's controlled. And control takes work. Constant, invisible, exhausting work. They are working, right now, to maintain the distance from you. That work is invisible from the outside because the system is good at making it look like stillness. But stillness that requires effort is not the same as stillness that comes from having nothing to be still about. And the difference between those two kinds of stillness is everything. The phone checks, and they happen, they absolutely happen, aren't the ones you're imagining. Not dramatic longing with the phone in hand at midnight, more like the phone appearing in their hand between tasks without a conscious decision to pick it up. The way the body moves toward checking something that the mind has officially decided doesn't in checking, not every hour, not every day necessarily, but with a regularity that reveals the system is trying they only want, doesn't make the distance less real. The distance is real. The silence is real. The days that pass without contact are real days, costing real time, happening in a real life that doesn't pause while you wait for a system to become capable of what it currently can be. Understanding the mechanism doesn't dissolve the mechanism. And this is the part that most explanations of avoidant attachment skip over, because it's the part that doesn't offer comfort. You can be the person they only want and still be alone. Those two things coexist. They coexist right now, probably. And knowing that they only want you doesn't change the fact of the aloneness. It just changes the story you tell about why it's happening. But the story matters. The story is not nothing. The story you tell about why the distance is happening determines what you do with yourself while it's happening. And what you do with yourself while it sups. While it's happening is the only thing currently within your control. Let's go deeper into why the system built this in the first place. Because understanding the surface behavior isn't enough. Surface behavior can be seen from outside. What you need is the interior logic, the reason this specific architecture exists, and why it works so well, and why it's so specifically destructive to the exact people it most needs. The avoidance system wasn't built in adulthood. It was built in a period when the nervous system was still forming and when the environment that nervous system was forming inside gave it consistent and repeated information about what emotional intensity meant, not in the abstract, in the body, in the specific physiological experience of what happened when emotional need or intensity or vulnerability was expressed in the presence of someone who mattered. What happened wasn't always dramatic. In fact, the cases where it's most entrenched are often the cases where the environment wasn't dramatically unsafe, just consistently misattuned in a particular direction. The parent who was physically present but emotionally unavailable in a way that couldn't be predicted or influenced. The household where achievement was praised and need was managed but rarely met with the specific warmth that meeting need with warmth requires. The dynamic where love was present but conditional in ways that were never spoken, only felt in the small withdrawals of warmth when the emotional temperature got too high, felt in the way the room changed when something real tried to enter it. The child in that environment does what all children do. They adapt. They build the attachment system that gets the most connection available in the environment they're in. And the attachment system that gets the most connection available in an environment that can't tolerate high emotional intensity is one that learns to want without showing it's wanting, to feel without the feeling becoming visible, to need without the need registering as need. The system that got built was sophisticated and successful and completely appropriate for the wall environment it was built in. And it is now completely inappropriate for any adult relationship that involves genuine intimacy, because genuine intimacy requires the vulnerability that the system was built specifically to prevent. And they know this, not always consciously, but in the body, in the place where the management operates before the mind can narrate it. There's knowledge of the gap between what they have and what they're getting. To have for the thing they feel for you to actually go anywhere. And that knowledge, that gap between the feeling and the capacity, is part of what the distance is regulating. It's not just regulating the feeling, it's regulating the awareness of the gap. Now here's the thing that makes you specifically the person they only want, and it's the thing that's also the most accurate source of the distance. Whatever you bring into the interaction, your presence, your attention, the particular way that you see things and respond to things and exist in space, it makes the gap visible to them in a way that most interactions don't. Most people they interact with don't require the capacity they don't have. You require it, not because you're demanding it, because what you offer implicitly asks for what you offer in return, and what you offer is the level of real that their system was built to manage by keeping it arm's length. You make the gap visible, and the gap is painful in a way that the management is specifically designed to not have to feel. So the management distances from you, not because you're the problem, you're the revelation. You're the one interaction that shows the system exactly what it served, and what it would need, and how far it currently is from being able to provide that. Distance from revelation isn't the same as distance from something unwanted, but it produces the same silence. There's a specific moment that happens in the dynamic between you and someone whose system is built this way, and it's the moment that's most important to understand because it's the one that gets replayed most often in the confusion of being in this. It's the moment when something real almost happened, when the management got thin enough, through tiredness, or the right kind of conversation, or a context that lowered the defenses just slightly below their usual operating level, that something underneath came close enough to the surface to be felt by both of you. You felt it. There's no question you felt it. Your nervous system has been tracking for exactly this, and it doesn't miss it when it happens. But more than that, you felt them feel it, and that's the part that stays. That's the evidence your system files and returns to in the long hours when the management is back at full capacity, and the distance has reassembled itself, and nothing about the surface behavior would suggest that moment ever happened. That moment is real. Whatever you felt in it was real. Whatever you felt them feel was also real. The management that came after it was the system doing what the system does when something real gets too close, pulling back from the edge before the exposure becomes irrevocable. And the trap in that moment, the one you're inside right now if you've lived that moment, is this. The reality of that moment is the reason you stay. The management that followed is the reason staying costs you what it costs. And there's no version of this where those two things separate cleanly. The same reality that makes staying make sense is the same reality that makes staying is difficult. You can't have the truth of the moment without the cost of the management that follows it. You can't discount the moment without losing the only accurate evidence you have of what's in you. So you hold both at the same time with no resolution available. That's not a failure of your judgment. That's the accurate experience of a situation that genuinely contains two contradictory true things simultaneously. What I want you to understand, and I mean understand in the body, not just in the mind, is that being the person they only want is not a position of powerlessness, even though it feels like one. It feels like powerlessness because the thing you want is inside a system you can't access directly. You can't reach in and reorganize the nervous system of another person. You can't do the work that would need to happen inside them. You can't make the gap smaller through effort or patience or understanding, but as much as all of those things come naturally to you. But the reason you're aware the person they only want is not something that exists only in relation to them. It's something that exists in you. The frequency that gets through their management, that touches what's underneath, that makes the gap visible, that's yours. It doesn't disappear when they're not in the room. It doesn't diminish because they can't currently handle it. It's not something they gave you that they can take back by withdrawing. You were this before them. You'll be this after. And whatever comes of what exists between you, that doesn't change. The question that's been building underneath everything in this script, the one that's been present since the first sentence even though I've been building toward it carefully, is not about them. It's not about what they do, or whether the system will ever change, or whether the gap will ever close enough for what's there to actually exist in the world, rather than just in the interior. The question is about you, about what you do with the part of yourself that keeps showing up, fully, specifically, undeniably, for someone whose system can receive what you are, but can't yet hold it. About what you owe that part of yourself, about how long you're willing to be the one thing in their life that makes the gap visible before. You ask what the visibility is costing the one doing the revealing. That question doesn't have an answer I can give you, but it's the only question in this entire situation that's actually yours to answer. And the weight of it, the real weight of it, not the version that gets lighter when you focus on them instead of on yourself, is this. If you already know you're the one they only want, and if you already know that being the one they only want hasn't changed the distance, what are you waiting for permission from them to do with the one life you have that they are currently at the center of without being fully present in?